I have seen with my own eyes non-human craft and non-human beings. That was Jay Stratton, former director of the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. In the trailer for the 2025 documentary, The Age of Disclosure, Stratton made a claim that, if true, would fundamentally change our understanding of UAP. But this isn't a story about whether the claim sounds convincing. It's a story about what can actually be established. Because over the past several years, a remarkable paper trail has emerged. Government programs, classified investigations, intelligence testimony, alleged recovered materials, and claims of technology that supposedly came from somewhere beyond Earth. Some of those records are unquestionably real. Some of the people making the claims really did hold positions inside the system. And some of the evidence has actually been tested. But when the pieces are separated and examined one by one, the story becomes much more complicated. So what does the evidence actually show? The claim. The paper trail begins in 2009. That year, the Defense Intelligence Agency established a little-known program called the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Application Program, AAWSAP. Its official purpose was to study advanced aerospace technologies and potential future threats. But the program's contractor also began investigating something else, UAP reports. The name AATIP would later become attached to the effort, although the Pentagon's historical review found it was never an official standalone program. Over time, the two names became intertwined. Then, the paper trail takes an unexpected turn. The contractor wasn't only studying advanced aerospace concepts, it was also investigating UAP cases, interviewing witnesses, and, according to the later historical review, proposing laboratories to examine what were described as alleged recovered UFO materials. That does not establish that the material was extraterrestrial, or even that the material existed. What it establishes is narrower. Claims of recovered material had entered the orbit of a real government-funded investigation. The program was real. The investigation was real. But the evidence for what was supposedly recovered was another matter entirely. The people who knew. But a paper trail doesn't tell you what people inside the system were being told. And by 2023, one former intelligence officer was prepared to say exactly that. David Grusch. Grusch told Congress that during his official duties, he had been informed of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. He also testified about what he described as non-human biologics associated with recovered craft. But there was an important limitation. Grusch was not presenting himself as a first-hand witness to those recoveries. He said the information came through his investigative work and conversations with people he had interviewed. He said some of those people had direct knowledge of the alleged programs. And every step away from direct observation adds another link to the chain. The evidence has to be evaluated at each link. But then the testimony changes. Jay Stratton, the former director of the Pentagon's UAP task force. In the trailer for the 2025 documentary, The Age of Disclosure, Stratton said,
"I have seen with my own eyes non-human craft and non-human beings."
That makes his claim fundamentally different from Grusch's. Stratton presented it as first-hand observation. But the statement was made within a documentary centered on allegations of government concealment of non-human technology and life. The venue matters because the source of a claim is part of its evidentiary weight. A first-hand statement is still a claim, and a person's credentials do not independently verify what that person says they saw. Now we have two very different kinds of testimony. One based on information gathered from other people, The other presented as first-hand observation. Neither one settles the question. So what can? The evidence. Evidence leaves a trail, a document, a physical sample, a record of custody, or independent sources that converge on the same fact. But each piece answers a different question. A government document can establish that something was reported. It can establish that an investigation existed. It cannot automatically establish that the allegation was true. So let's test the strongest pieces of the case. One of the most frequently cited is a set of notes attributed to physicist Eric Davis, commonly known as the Wilson-Davis Memo. The notes describe an alleged 2002 conversation with Admiral Thomas Wilson about an effort to locate a highly classified program reportedly connected to the recovery and analysis of an unusual object. If authentic, and if the conversation occurred as described, the document would be extraordinarily important. But Wilson has denied that the meeting took place, so the document leaves us with a conflict. The account recorded in the notes and Wilson's denial of the meeting itself. The notes were later entered into the congressional record, but that does not mean Congress authenticated their contents, and even if the notes accurately recorded a conversation, they would still establish only what that conversation allegedly contained, not automatically that the underlying program existed, not automatically that material had been recovered, and certainly not that the material was non-human. Then there is Stratton's claim. Unlike Grusch, Stratton presented his account as first-hand observation. The public record gives us the statement itself, and the fact that he held a senior position inside the UAP investigation. What it does not give us is independent evidence establishing what he saw. His credentials establish his position. They do not independently verify the observation. So Stratton's statement remains documented testimony, but the underlying observation remains unverified. Then there is the physical evidence. In 2022, AARO contracted Oak Ridge National Laboratory to examine a magnesium-alloy specimen publicly alleged to have come from a crashed extraterrestrial vehicle in 1947. The claim surrounding the specimen was extraordinary. It was alleged to possess unusual properties, including the ability to function as a terahertz waveguide. So this time, the material could be tested. ORNL examined its elemental composition, isotopic ratios, and structure. The result did not support the extraordinary interpretation. ORNL assessed the specimen as terrestrial in origin. Its isotopic composition was unremarkable and consistent with manufactured terrestrial material. And the laboratory found that it did not meet the theoretical requirements to function as the claimed terahertz waveguide. AARO concurred with that assessment. This particular specimen did not establish extraterrestrial technology. Then there is another piece of the paper trail, KONA BLUE. AARO's historical review found that KONA BLUE was a proposed Department of Homeland Security program associated with claims about the retrieval and exploitation of non-human biologics. The proposal was real, but KONA BLUE was never approved or formally established. It received no materials, it received no funding, and AARO found that no data or material of any kind was ever transferred to or collected by the Department of Homeland Security under the program. A proposal describing alleged material is not the same thing as the material itself. So the question isn't whether the case contains interesting evidence. It does. The question is what each piece can actually establish, and whether independent pieces converge on the same conclusion. Because that's where a claim becomes something more. The official account. Someone has to assess it, and now they do. In 2022, the Pentagon established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, to investigate UAP and assess what the available evidence could establish. AARO later conducted a historical review of UAP investigations and claims surrounding alleged extraterrestrial technology. The report was titled, "Report on the Historical Record of U.S. Government Involvement with Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, Volume 1. Published in February 2024, it examined government records and interviewed people involved in the history it was reviewing. And its conclusion was unusually specific. AARO found no empirical evidence that the U.S. government or private companies were reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology. Its historical review also found no U.S. government investigation that had confirmed a UAP represented off-world technology. But many UAP reports remain unresolved. AARO's own reporting explains that some observations remain unidentified because the available sensor data is insufficient to make a positive attribution. An observation can therefore be genuine and still remain unresolved. Unresolved means the available evidence did not allow a determination. It does not identify the cause. But the crash retrieval claim requires something much more specific. Recovered technology, non-human material, reverse engineering. And on that question, AARO says it found no empirical evidence supporting the claim. AARO also identified another possibility. Authentic classified U.S. government programs can produce real documents, real contractors, real secrecy, real compartmentalization, without the underlying activity being extraterrestrial. AARO says it found cases in which interviewees had associated genuine classified programs with extraterrestrial activity. Its investigation found no evidence that those programs were reverse engineering off-world technology. KONA BLUE illustrates the distinction. A real proposal existed. The extraordinary claims surrounding it existed. But AARO found that the proposed program was never approved or formally established, received no materials or funding, and that no data or material was transferred to or collected by DHS under it. And the official record has continued to grow. AARO's latest consolidated annual report was released in July 2026 and covers cases through May 30th, 2025. It includes a Navy case off the Virginia coast involving approximately 100 airborne UAP and 2 likely uncrewed surface systems. AARO says that case remains under investigation. The public report provides limited additional information about what those objects were. That is important, because unresolved cases still exist inside the government's own investigative system. At the same time, unresolved does not become evidence of extraterrestrial origin simply because an investigation remains open. The two facts can coexist. AARO has found no empirical evidence of extraterrestrial technology, and unresolved observations remain. One statement describes what the evidence has established. The other describes where the evidence is still incomplete. And somewhere between those two boundaries is where interpretation begins. 5 different kinds of evidence have brought us here. Documents, testimony, physical material, classified programs, and the investigations that tried to connect them. They don't all carry the same evidentiary weight. Some pieces can be independently checked. Some depend on what someone says they were told. Some remain disputed. And some leave us with nothing more definitive than an unanswered question. So this is where the investigation has to become more disciplined. Not what could have happened, but what has actually been established. Documented. There are things we can establish. The United States government conducted genuine investigations into UAP. Genuine classified programs existed within the broader historical landscape surrounding some of these claims. The Wilson-Davis Notes exist as a document entered into the congressional record. Jay Stratton publicly made a first-hand claim that he had seen non-human craft and beings. And AARO conducted a historical review of claims about U.S. government involvement with UAP. These are documented parts of the story. Contested. The Wilson-Davis Notes describe an alleged conversation concerning a highly classified program and the search for an unusual object. Admiral Thomas Wilson has denied that the meeting occurred. The document exists. Its account remains disputed. Stratton's statement is also documented. The underlying observation remains independently unverified. The distinction matters. A witness can be sincere and still remain unverified. Physical evidence. The magnesium-alloy specimen gives us one of the clearest examples of an extraordinary claim being put to an actual test. AARO says the specimen had been publicly alleged to have come from a crashed extraterrestrial vehicle in 1947, and to possess extraordinary properties. AARO contracted Oak Ridge National Laboratory to examine it. ORNL assessed the specimen as terrestrial in origin. Its isotopic composition was consistent with manufactured terrestrial material, and the laboratory found that it did not meet the theoretical requirements to function as the claimed terahertz waveguide. AARO concurred. This particular specimen did not establish extraterrestrial technology. That's a conclusion about this material. Not every material ever alleged to have been recovered. KONA BLUE is different. It is not physical evidence. It is a paper trail. AARO's historical review found that KONA BLUE was a proposed Department of Homeland Security program associated with claims about the retrieval and exploitation of non-human biologics. The proposal was real. So KONA BLUE establishes that extraordinary claims had entered a real government proposal. It does not establish that the alleged material existed. Unknown. Then, there are the questions the evidence still cannot answer. What exactly did some of these witnesses encounter? What were some of the objects described in historical reports? Were genuinely anomalous materials ever recovered? And if they were, what were they? AARO's latest reporting shows that unresolved cases remain under investigation. An unresolved observation marks the limit of the available evidence. It does not, by itself, identify an origin. What the evidence can support. AARO's historical review found no empirical evidence that the U.S. government or private companies were reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology. That finding matters. Its scope matters too. It addresses what AARO was able to establish about the alleged programs. It does not resolve every UAP report, and it does not turn every unresolved observation into evidence of extraterrestrial technology. AARO is a government office operating within the national security and intelligence system. Its mission is explicitly concerned with minimizing technical and intelligence surprise. That gives its findings institutional weight. It also tells us what kind of institution is making the assessment. So AARO's conclusions should be examined, not simply accepted. The strongest conclusions in this investigation come from evidence that can be independently examined. A laboratory result can be tested. A document can be authenticated or disputed. A testimony can be compared with earlier statements and other evidence. The question is not whether the conclusion is extraordinary. The question is whether the evidence is strong enough to support it. What we can reasonably conclude. So, what survives? We can say that UAP reports were genuinely made, investigated, and documented. We can say that genuine classified programs existed within the historical environment surrounding some of these claims. We can say that the Wilson Davis account remains disputed. We can say that Jay Stratton publicly made a first-hand claim of seeing non-human craft and beings. We cannot independently verify that claim from the evidence examined here. We can say that the magnesium specimen was actually tested, and that the testing did not support an extraterrestrial origin. And we can say that AARO found no empirical evidence that the US government or private companies were reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology. But there is an important distinction. The absence of public proof is not the same thing as proof that the underlying question has been settled. When the evidence is considered as a whole, there is enough documented history, enough testimony from people who held serious positions inside the system, enough evidence of classified investigation, and enough unresolved observation that dismissing the entire subject as nothing does not adequately account for the record. But neither does the evidence justify declaring the extraordinary conclusion proven. That is the position this investigation leaves us with. The public record supports a real history of government investigation, secrecy, extraordinary testimony, and unresolved observations. It supports the conclusion that some programs, documents, and investigations were unquestionably real. It supports the conclusion that at least some extraordinary material claims can be tested and can fail that test. But the most extraordinary claim remains unestablished. Whether any of this ultimately involved technology or material of non-human origin, the public record we examined does not allow us to say. And that is not a failure of the investigation. It is its conclusion. Some claims survived documentation. Some remain disputed. One prominent physical claim was tested and did not produce the result claimed. And some questions remain genuinely open. So, after following the evidence as far as the public record allows, we are left with a boundary. On one side, what the evidence can support. On the other, what we are still being asked to believe. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this investigation, please like the video and subscribe for the next case.